3 weeks ago, I said sell in August. My prediction is kind of that we could peak in August and that September will be a bit more corrective. Don't worry, friends. I'm not saying we'll enter a bear market then, just a completely normal correction, like always. I'm staying rational. I won't get emotional just because some prices are going up a bit now. Of course, I also got some really nasty comments here about what I'm talking about again and so on. That's always the problem as a YouTuber. If you see things a bit critically or talk about the possibility of a correction, even though that's completely normal, that's exactly when you get hate, dislikes, or lose subscribers. But now we're seeing a rise in the altcoin season index, and some people are already starting to talk about how we might slowly be entering altcoin season, that we could now experience a massive euphoric altcoin season phase. And because I care about you, I'm making a detailed video now where you can really see clearly when we actually enter altcoin season and at what point you definitely need to sell your altcoins. And with altcoins, you should always know that you should sell 100% because altcoins really get drained during the bear market and it's simply not worth holding on to altcoins over multiple cycles. With Bitcoin, that might be a different story, but even with Bitcoin, it's actually always worth selling at the top. And we don't want to miss out on any of this, which is why I'm making this video now. And that's exactly why I took a look at a few things. When do we see an altcoin season? I actually find this pretty interesting. We had our Bitcoin top here on April 14th, 2021. I've marked it for you here again as well. Here we had the Bitcoin top, and with the P-cycle top indicator, we crossed on April 20th. And it's very important to understand this now. I'll reset the whole thing. That was the 2021 cycle. Let's move over here and just look at the cycle. There we see that we had our Bitcoin top here, and right around the Bitcoin top, these two lines crossed. And this is very important to understand because with the P-cycle top indicator, when these lines cross, that's exactly when we're in an overheated Bitcoin zone, and that's exactly when the altcoin season began. Because as you can see, these two data points are relatively similar, just offset by about a week. Now we're looking at the altcoin chart, and here we can clearly see that the top for altcoins in this first run was reached on May 10th, so about 3 or 4 weeks later. So Bitcoin reached its top, the P-cycle top indicator crossed, and 3 or 4 weeks later, we also saw the peak for altcoins. We can also look at specific altcoins here. For example, BNB coin reached its top on May 10th. Cardano, exactly the same, the top was reached on May 10th. After that, there was this big correction and then there was another upward trend in Bitcoin where we reached the double top. But that was already half a year later. For ELF, we also reached our top on May 14th. That means you should pay close attention to this. When Bitcoin overheats here, when we get a crossover on the P-cycle top indicator, we have about 3 or 4 weeks left. By then, we should have sold most of our altcoins. Because that's exactly the phase when a lot is happening with the altcoins. We can also see this quite clearly in this chart. Here we have Bitcoin, you see, and here in purple we have the total 3 chart. And you can see the total 3 chart moves exactly the same as Bitcoin, going up a bit here and there. Then Bitcoin rises a bit more strongly than the total 3 chart, and at that point a lot of focus is simply on Bitcoin. But when Bitcoin overheats and we cross at the P-cycle top indicator, that's exactly when a lot of capital flows into this market again, especially into the altcoins, and we see a really intense phase of euphoria. It is precisely during this phase that the altcoins have completely decoupled from Bitcoin and shot up sharply. And that's what you need to understand here, how the whole thing works. Of course, that's not all. In the real economy, there are also periods when you can generally make more money and times when you can make less. And that's also because in the real world, we have periods and cycles in which, for example, the money supply is expanded. And an expansion of the money supply is very important. And we can see here that, especially in 2024, 2025, and 2026, there's a lot of money to be made because that's the period when we're going to experience a monetary expansion. And of course, that's not just something you see on the chart. We can already observe it happening. It's especially crucial for altcoins that we have an expansion of global liquidity and that the Fed's balance sheet is also increasing, along with a growth in the money supply. These two factors are extremely important. And we can clearly see that we already have really strong global liquidity here. The M2 money supply keeps rising steadily. And we can see here with the M2 money supply, it's really going up. So we definitely already have global liquidity. What we don't have yet is an increase in the Fed's balance sheet, because currently the Fed's balance sheet is not rising. Instead, the Fed is still pulling capital out of the markets, simply because inflation is higher in the US and they're trying to fight it. But now, after John Paul's speech, we've noticed that it's very likely we will see interest rate cuts. And that's the great thing. If we do see interest rate cuts, I still expect that it could become a sell the news event in the short term, but then we'll see an expansion of money supply in the US. Plus, we can already see that global liquidity is rising, and the combination of both brings an enormous amount of liquidity into the market. That's exactly what ultimately boosts the altcoins, because right now we're in such a restrictive monetary policy environment that not much money can flow into risk assets. And investors notice that these days, investors aren't as risk tolerant because we simply have such tight monetary policy. But as I said, that's very likely to change starting from September 17th. That means we absolutely have to pay attention. When the P-cycle top indicator crosses, we usually have about a month left, and then we should sell the altcoins. If we fall below the 200-day moving average, the altcoins will also drop sharply. You can remember that too, because here we have the daily 200-day moving average. And here we can see very clearly that we've been rising the whole time. It was only from the point where we started falling sharply here that we really lost a lot of capital in altcoins. That was exactly this period right here. Then take a look at the altcoin chart here. We really lost a lot of capital in altcoins here, and that was exactly the time when we were also falling below the 200-day moving average here. So that's something you should pay attention to as well. If we start falling here, you should also get out of altcoins and sell. But what I really like is that we've been steadily rising over the past few months. And that's also the reason why I don't have to worry about altcoins at the moment, because we're continuing to rise here. It only becomes dangerous if we start to fall here. And what's also important is that when Bitcoin dominance reaches 45%, at the latest, you should absolutely sell because around 45% Bitcoin dominance was on May 10th. And that means that at around 45% Bitcoin dominance, most altcoins are at their peak. And at the latest, that's when you should take partial profits or exit most positions directly. That means we can really draw a zone here and say when we're between 48 and 45% Bitcoin dominance, we should gradually exit altcoins, selling them off. And that's something you can easily remember as an exit strategy. The thing is, at the end of videos like this, I like to introduce a few coins that I'm currently accumulating. But I have to say, these days I'm more active in trading anyway. Right now, I don't really have any open positions or any coins where I'd say, okay, this is where I would accumulate. In the past few weeks, we've mentioned LF several times in the trading group, but at this point, it's just gotten way too expensive, so it's really not worth entering anymore. It might still be worth entering with Athena, because Athena is simply a project that's completely involved in the stablecoin space. They offer stablecoins themselves. They're already being used a lot these days and are generating a lot of revenue. I could still see this as an interesting project because we're simply seeing that Donald Trump's company now has its own stablecoin, and this stablecoin already has a market cap of 2.5 billion. So it's really a complete success, and in general, we can see that things are moving more and more in the direction of stablecoins. And I think stablecoins are just a narrative in this cycle. And that's why I could imagine that Athena might be right at the forefront here, but otherwise I also find a project like Tau interesting. But I've always found it interesting. As you know, in the AI sector, Tau could definitely make an impact. In my opinion, it's the best AI project we have so far in the overall market. But apart from that, some projects have risen a bit too high right now, so I wouldn't really get in anymore. Chainlink is a great project, Hyper is a great project, but I showed you Chainlink and Hyperliquid when they were much cheaper. With Hyperliquid, we talked a lot about it when it was between $15 and $20, and with Chainlink when it was at $12, $13, $14. That's why, at the moment, I would rather stay away from them and maybe watch the market a bit more. If you're already in, maybe you shouldn't exit too early, but otherwise for now, I just keep an eye on the market over the next few days or weeks. And there's really not much more to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of work. Check out our trading VIP group. We have trading signals there, copy trading and so on, and just take a look at our copy trader here. Every one of the last trades was successful. We can keep looking further. Only here did we have a losing trade. Otherwise, all the trades were successful, and that's no joke. You can check all of this yourself. So join us there. It's a huge added value and all of it is free. Everything you need to know is in the description.